evening and welcome to Gravitas and Palki Sharma Upadhyay.
Stay connected with the world through WION. Like the page on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter for new alerts. Instagram for videos and images. And the website for the latest news, views and analysis. WIONews.com. World is one.
Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started.
Gravitas, co-presented by Skoda Superb, best in next class. Co-powered by Star Health Insurance, the health insurance specialist.
The movie industry bring
There's many a slip between the cup and the lip. Jack Ma will tell you how true this is. One day he was all set to launch the world's biggest IPO. The next day he lost billions of dollars and went missing. China's most celebrated entrepreneur, a man who has inspired young people with his stories of perseverance, is now in the headlines in a new role. Jack Ma is now Xi Jinping's top target, apparently. Reports say the Chinese president is personally leading the crackdown against the Alibaba founder. There are no official statements from either side, but the speculation is immense. And China's actions spell out its intent. The Communist Party has declared war on the country's tech giant. Xi Jinping wanted to rule the world using Chinese technology. But first, he wants to rule Chinese technology himself and beat the titans into submission. On Gravitas tonight, we tell you the story of the rise and fall of Jack Ma. Also on the show, India clears 2 vaccines for emergency use, but the rollout is caught in politics and questions on efficacy and trial data. We'll break it down for you. Did Donald Trump try to steal the election by rigging votes? A leaked phone conversation has kicked off a storm. Tibet's parliament in exile holds the first round of voting to elect its new leaders, with polling booths set all over the world. We'll bring you the full story. And the Vatican is caught in another financial row. This time, it involves transfer of $1.8 billion to Australia. How did the church get so much money and where did it send it? We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange will not be extradited to the United States to face espionage charges after a UK judge refused extradition over concerns for Assange's mental health. The ruling comes after more than a decade of legal controversies. Amid tensions between India and China at the line of actual control in eastern Ladakh, China deployed tanks opposite Indian posts at the line of actual control. The exclusive video in possession of WION shows China has deployed 30 to 35 tanks opposite Rezangla, Rechinla and Mukhosri locations. The UK has started the first rollout of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine as it struggles to fight a severe wave of infections attributed to the new coronavirus variant. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has warned of tougher lockdown restrictions. However, he says schools are safe and children should continue to attend where permitted. A bill has been introduced in the United States House of Representatives to remove Pakistan from the list of major non-NATO allies. The bill aims to deny Pakistan access to US defense supplies and purchases and also deny funds for defense purchases. Japan Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga has warned that a nationwide emergency is being seriously contemplated in view of the rising COVID-19 cases in Tokyo and neighboring prefectures. Amid rising tensions between the US and Iran, the Pentagon has reversed its decision to withdraw the USS Nimitz aircraft carrier from the West Asian region. The acting US Secretary of Defense has announced that he had changed his mind about sending the Nimitz home, citing recent threats issued by Iranian leaders against President Trump and other US government officials. A Spanish-flagged humanitarian ship has rescued more than 265 migrants from the Mediterranean Sea. Most of the migrants were from Eritrea, Egypt, Syria and Sudan and were fleeing Libya on board precarious wooden boats. A pastor was killed and 2 other people injured in a shooting at an East Texas church on Sunday after the pastor confronted a man who had hidden from police in the church overnight. The suspect was apprehended after the shooting. Cricket Australia is confident that the 4th test against India will go ahead in Brisbane as scheduled and has rubbished reports that the Indian team has threatened a boycott over heightened coronavirus restrictions. Queensland has closed its border with New South Wales following a fresh COVID-19 outbreak in Sydney, which is the venue of the 3rd test. A special arrangement has been agreed to allow the players to travel. Players from both teams have also cleared COVID-19 tests conducted on Sunday. Stephen Curry scored a career-best 62 points to lead the Golden State Warriors to a 137-122 victory over the Portland Trail Blazers. The 2-time MVP made his intentions clear with 21 points in the first quarter itself and scored exactly 31 points in each half. At 32, he is the second oldest person in NBA history to score 60 points in a match after the late Kobe Bryant, who did it at the age of 37.
Where is Jack Ma? This question has ruled the internet today. Reports say China's most celebrated entrepreneur has gone missing. For months now, Jack Ma has not been seen in public. He hasn't posted anything on social media. His last public appearance was in late October 2020. And this was almost a week before his company's IPO was blocked. It was supposed to be the world's biggest IPO, initial public offering, worth more than $35 billion. The company we're talking about is called the Ant Group. Had the IPO gone ahead, the Ant Group would have become the world's most valuable company. But that did not happen. The government of China did not let it happen. The IPO was killed at the very last minute, and then the company's founder went missing. So what happened to Jack Ma? Why is China going after its biggest businessman? We look for answers in our cover story tonight. First things first, the mystery surrounding Jack Ma. The question is, where is he? And the answer, frankly, is nobody really knows. But there's a lot of speculation. It started with this report, a report that says Chinese billionaire Jack Ma suspected missing. The report goes on to say what we told you before. It has been months and Jack Ma has not been seen in public. Not being seen, by the way, is not the same as going missing. So on this show, we will not exaggerate like many other reports are doing. For all we know, the man is simply lying low. There is no word from his company or his family that he has technically disappeared. So let's choose our words with care. The Alibaba founder is staying out of the public eye. And this is the most obvious indication. He is no longer the face of an African talent show that he created. Jack Ma was supposed to be the judge on Africa's Business Heroes. Africa's Business Heroes. It's a show to feature budding entrepreneurs in Africa. Contestants were promised a chance to pitch their business ideas directly to Jack Ma, but that's not going to happen now. Someone else is filling in for him. Apparently, another executive from Alibaba is now judging this contest. Jack Ma's name has been struck off the event. His photograph has been removed from the show's website. He's out of the promotional video too. There is no telling if he's doing it on purpose or if he's been forced to do so. Either way, Jack Ma has good reason to stay out of the public eye. His empire is under a direct attack from Beijing, more specifically from the Communist Party of China. It began with a speech last year, 2020, at a summit where Jack Ma criticized Chinese regulators. He almost dared them by saying, and I'm quoting from what he said, "Great innovation won't back down because of regulations. But it shouldn't be regulated with yesterday's means." Those were the words that killed the Ant Group IPO. And now Beijing is cutting Jack Ma to size. Executives of the Ant Group were summoned in December. The Chinese regulators ordered the company to overhaul operations. The scrutiny is leading to losses for Jack Ma. After the state-led crackdown began, he has lost $11 billion. Jack Ma no longer runs Alibaba, but he controls the Ant Group. It is a financial services company that had spin-off from Alibaba in 2011. It began as a mobile payment service called Alipay. You may have heard of it. As of today, about 70% of China's population uses Alipay for purchases. 70%. It is the market leader in digital payments in China. Then the company expanded its services. It entered the micro-loans business. So far, the Ant Group has given loans to more than 20 million small businesses and close to 500 million individuals. Next, they entered the investment business. Today, the Ant Group operates China's largest mutual fund. They also sell other financial products. Basically, the Ant Group is like a bank in your pocket. It's everywhere. It has millions of customers. It has become too powerful, and China has a problem with that. Xi Jinping does not like sharing power. His government is now practically dictating how Jack Ma should run his business. It wants the Ant Group to, quote-unquote, return to its roots. What does that mean? Basically, rejig the company. Stick to its core business, digital payments. A few weeks back, Jack Ma threw a Hail Mary. During a meeting with the regulators, he offered every platform that the Ant Group has. Let me once again quote from what he said. "You can take any of the platforms Ant has as long as the country needs it." That is what Jack Ma told the authorities in China, according to the Wall Street Journal. It was a message of surrender, but it failed to save him. China believes that Jack Ma crossed a line by challenging the regulators. By punishing him, they're setting an example. They're sending a message to all tech billionaires. The party comes first. And this is not just a crackdown on Jack Ma. It's part of China's mega campaign to rein in big tech. And it is being led by the Chinese president himself. As we said, Jack Ma is the most celebrated Chinese entrepreneur in the world. Today, he has a target on his back, and he has only one man to blame for this: Xi Jinping, the president of China, who's said to have personally scuttled the Ant Group IPO. Jack Ma is a member of the Communist Party. He's one of their own. And yet he is being hounded. What did he do to invite the wrath of Xi Jinping? This report has the answers.
It was supposed to be the biggest IPO in history. $35 billion and driven by China's most well-known entrepreneur, Jack Ma. But just days before the Ant Group was set to list, all hell broke loose. Beijing hit the brakes on Jack Ma's IPO. So who killed the biggest listing in history? It was Xi Jinping himself. The trigger was a speech. A scathing criticism of Chinese regulators by Jack Ma. Just before his IPO, Ma attended a summit in Shanghai. The participants included the who's who of China's financial, regulatory and political establishment. One of the attendees was Wang Xishan, the Chinese vice president. In front of this august crowd, Jack Ma said China's banks operate like pawn shops and that the regulators are stifling innovation. The Alibaba founder paid a heavy price for those words. Reports say the message reached the top. Xi Jinping read government reports about Jack Ma's statements. The Chinese president was furious. He personally ordered Chinese regulators to start an investigation. They are studying some plans that could force the Ant Group to divest investments in financial companies. These disinvestments would ultimately shrink the Ant Group's influence over Chinese markets. Also losing equity is the founder. Jack Ma, once the most celebrated entrepreneur in China, is now being painted as the enemy. He has been called a villain, an evil capitalist and a blood-sucking ghost. His strategy has backfired. First, he infuriated the regulators with his speech and then overplayed his hand by lobbying with them. The Chinese state hit back with a new set of regulations. The new rules dictated how companies like the Ant Group will operate in the future. China declared that it is protecting investors by halting the Ant Group's IPO.
The decision to postpone is a reflection of the relevant Securities Exchange Department fulfilling its responsibility of self-regulation. This was a decision made by the relevant exchange organizations in accordance with relevant laws and regulations in order to better protect the stability of the capital market and protect the interests of investors.
A day before this statement, Jack Ma and his executives were summoned by the Central Bank of China and 3 other regulators. The rare joint meeting prompted speculation. Many claimed that Jack Ma was given a dressing down. The Chinese state under Xi Jinping values loyalty and submission above everything else. With his words in Shanghai, Jack Ma challenged the state. The Alibaba founder now faces not just scrutiny of his business, he also must pass the Communist Party's loyalty test. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Jack Ma's story is not technically rags to riches, but it's a very compelling story nonetheless. It's a story that every Chinese citizen wants to emulate. Jack Ma is bigger than life. His personality is so towering that it is not shy of overshadowing Chinese President Xi Jinping. And that is exactly where the president's insecurity stems from. Jack Ma, or Ma Yun, started off as a lecturer in English. He became a member of the Communist Party, the Chinese Communist Party, and went on to found China's biggest online commerce company, Alibaba. He did not stop there. He launched Alipay and ventured into finance. 17 years on, Jack Ma now is China's richest man. He has a Western name. Around $50 billion in banks. A career graph that every young Chinese wants to follow, and a reputation for challenging Chinese authorities. Jack Ma is not just a billionaire, he's a people's billionaire. Think about it. Jack Ma has a career in films. He made an acting debut in 2017 by playing an invisible kung fu fighter. Jack Ma has sung on stage, danced in front of huge crowds. He writes kung fu fiction, he practices Tai Chi. He teams up with Jet Li. Jack Ma also plays poker. He paints. His works are auctioned at Sotheby's. Jack Ma has his employees do handstands at work. He's on the board of SoftBank. He's on the board of the Nature Conservancy. He speaks fluent English. In short, Jack Ma is a superhero in China. He is the daddy Ma of China, the big daddy. Outside the country, he's China's poster boy. The first prominent Chinese man Trump met after he won the US presidential election in 2016. How do you think Xi Jinping views all of this? Of course he doesn't like it. He wants to be the be-all and end-all of China. Xi Jinping wanted to make China a global superpower through technology. Jack Ma was supposed to be his foot soldier in that plan. An entrepreneur who understood technology, who could appear alongside top Chinese leaders, at the same time connect with a global audience. That was Jack Ma's role. He was supposed to be the face that told Xi Jinping's success story. But he became too big for the president's liking. He became China's success story himself. And now Xi Jinping is cutting him to size. Not only did Jack Ma become China's biggest star, he also questioned China's policies. And that too openly. At a time when Xi Jinping's regime is already under global scrutiny, Jack Ma was becoming a threat to the president and his narrative. He'd gone from being an entrepreneur and CCP member to a superstar critic. Chinese mouthpiece The People's Daily had to issue a headline that read, "There is no so-called Jack Ma era, only Jack Ma in the era." The same article went on to explain, and I'm quoting, "A good seedling can grow into a towering tree only when it meets the suitable soil and climatic conditions." Look at the things that have happened in the last few months. At a time when Xi Jinping was being lambasted for exporting a virus, the Jack Ma Foundation was in the headlines for sending PPE kits to 150 countries. Then came the Shanghai speech. It defined a protagonist and an antagonist in the China story. Jack Ma became the hero, Xi Jinping the villain. Now he's paying the price for looking too good. Recalling his childhood, Jack Ma had once said, "I was never afraid of opponents who were bigger than I." Well, for a while it seemed that he was following that principle. The 56-year-old Jack Ma was taking on China's strongmen. Beijing cracked the whip, Jack Ma surrendered, but he may not be spared. For years, China told the story of its growth through Jack Ma, and now China is telling the story of its party's power through Jack Ma. The kind of crackdown that Beijing loves to pull off. An Interpol chief goes missing in China. Meng Hongwei was arrested on arrival. A top film star goes missing in China. Fan Bingbing came out after months apologizing. And now a tech giant has reportedly disappeared. Xi Jinping's insecurity and the need to assert his power reveals itself in high-profile disappearances in China. This is how the president talks to his critics. And here's something else that will further contribute to Xi Jinping's insecurity. The Tibetan government in exile has gone to polls in Dharamshala in India. Elections for the 17th Parliament of the Central Tibetan Administration have kick-started. The results will be out on the 14th of May. Here's all you need to know about the election process, the front-runners, the number of registered voters, and the polling booths across the world.
Lying in the shadow of the mighty Himalayas is the quaint town of Dharamshala, the home of the Dalai Lama and the Central Tibetan Administration. It is the parliamentary government of Tibetans in exile formed way back in 1959. To this day, it is not officially recognized by the Chinese regime. But the Tibetan diaspora and refugees across the world have supported this administration by voting for members of its parliament. Elections for its 17th parliament are currently underway. The polling began on the 3rd of January. Hundreds of Tibetans living in Dharamshala lined up to cast their ballot in the first round of voting. The second and final round is scheduled for the 11th of April. The new Sikyong, or president, will be announced on the 14th of May, along with 45 parliamentarians, the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker. The current leader, Lobsang Sangay, who completes his second term as president, has shared this message.
Despite the pandemic, Tibetans in almost 40 countries are taking part in the election, and young and old, all are coming out and participating in election. So this is, momentous and historic event because, even though we are in exile, even though in South Asia we are refugees, but we are exercising our fundamental right.
According to the last survey of the Tibetan diaspora, there are more than 140,000 Tibetans living in exile in more than 40 countries. India is home to at least 100,000 of them. This year, as many as 80,000 Tibetans have registered themselves as voters. Out of this, 55,000 voters reside in India.
Tibet is under occupation, but Tibetans in exile are free and given a chance, an opportunity. We prefer democracy over authoritarian system.
A record number of 150 candidates are vying for the top political post. The frontrunners are Kasur Dongchung Gotup, the representative of the Dalai Lama in New Delhi; Kelsang Dorji or Katsang, the former representative of the Dalai Lama to North America; Penpa Sering, the former Speaker of the Parliament in exile; and Acharya Yeshi Funtosok, the incumbent Deputy Speaker. Their fate is being sealed at 12 polling stations in Dharamshala. Besides this, important polling stations have been set up in New York, Toronto, and London. The elections are taking place with all the necessary support from New Delhi. For 61 years, India has not only housed Tibetans in exile and preserved their cultural heritage, but has only enabled them to democratically elect their leader every 5 years. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
It was a good weekend for India. The country approved 2 Wuhan virus vaccines. Emergency use approvals were given to the Oxford AstraZeneca shot, Covishield, and the Bharat Biotech vaccine, Covaxin. Now, both are 2-shot vaccines, Covishield and Covaxin, and both are easy to store and distribute. The vaccines have been approved. Administering the shots is next. As India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi described it, India will be starting the largest vaccination program in the world. The task is to vaccinate more than 1.3 billion people. No timeline has been announced so far, but mass vaccination is expected to begin soon. Reports claim it can be as early as this week. The question is, who will get the vaccine first? Healthcare workers and frontline workers. They make up the first priority group, and they will be administered the vaccine for free. The second group includes persons above the age of 50 and persons with comorbidities who have other illnesses and are more vulnerable to the Wuhan virus. This vaccination is being called India's most ambitious vaccination drive ever. Mock drills have already been held in 125 districts and across all states. At least 96,000 vaccinators have been trained. Cold chain infrastructure has been upgraded. India has secured enough shots to vaccinate its priority group. Those eligible for the vaccine in the first phase will be notified through a text message. They will be informed about the health facility they need to go to for the shot. They'll get that message. They will also be provided a date and time when should they go to the health facility. That said, India has kept the vaccination voluntary, so you can choose to not take the shot. But that's not the government's biggest challenge right now. As with most things in India, politics is the biggest hurdle. Despite all the checks, India has not been able to immunize itself from vaccine politics. India's vaccination program has come under criticism, most of it directed towards the approval of Covaxin, the homegrown vaccine developed by Bharat Biotech and ICMR, the Indian Council of Medical Research, ICMR. Critics say this vaccine has not been vetted properly, Covaxin, and was approved prematurely. The director of India's premier medical institute, AIIMS, suggested that Covaxin be kept as a backup vaccine. India's opposition leaders have questioned the lack of efficacy data for Covaxin. Some opposition leaders. They also raised questions around the safety of the shot. Some called it a BJP vaccine, tagging it to the ruling party at the centre in India. Such politicization in the middle of a pandemic is downright dangerous. Spreading rumours, sowing mistrust among people regarding the vaccine is plain wrong. As far as the questions about efficacy and trial data are concerned, we had some answers today from the horse's mouth. The managing director of Bharat Biotech, Krishna Ella, answered some of these questions. He also opened a Pandora's box, by the way. He named a vaccine company and said that it was giving paracetamol to its volunteers. In other words, this vaccine maker was suppressing adverse reactions in the recipients. He also said that while most vaccine makers have data of around 1,000 volunteers, Bharat Biotech is the only company, his company, with data of 25,000 people, and that the company has carried out, quote-unquote, 200% honest clinical trials. This is what the company's managing director is claiming. He said that most vaccines will not be effective in the second year. None of the vaccine makers have said if their shots will be effective in case of transmission of the virus. But let me repeat this. These are the claims of Bharat Biotech MD Krishna Ella. WION has not been able to independently verify any of what he said. But here's what we can tell you. These are desperate times. They call for desperate measures. Vaccine makers want to sell their shots. Politicians want to play politics over vaccines. Governments want to roll out vaccines as soon as possible. Accusations and mudslinging do not help anyone. Avoiding transparency is even worse. We thought the world would be a safer place if we found a vaccine. Well, clearly we did not account for the politics that will contaminate the shot. How's the rest of the world doing? The global model is the same as India's. They start with the frontline workers and the most vulnerable population. But countries like Indonesia are inoculating the healthy and working population first, while the United Kingdom is mixing vaccines, meaning one person could get 2 different types of shots. Why are they doing this? The next report has the answers.
Indonesia is gearing up for the jab. But unlike most countries in the world, the first shots for the Wuhan virus will go to those who are young and healthy. Indonesia will inoculate its working population first. The reason are Chinese vaccines. Indonesia has a deal to get around 125 million shots of the Sinovac shot, the first batch of 3 million doses. But Indonesia doesn't know if the shot would work on the elderly. The Chinese shot has been tested on 18 to 59-year-olds in Indonesia. So they'll get the Chinese vaccines, while the elderly will have to wait. The first person in line is Indonesian President Joko Widodo himself, who is promising free shots for every citizen.
Melakukan perhitungan ulang mengenai keuangan negara.
After recalculating our state's financial status, I'd like to announce that vaccinations for the people are free of charge. I'd like to reiterate that I will be the first person to receive the vaccination.
Indonesia is not the only country to adopt a different approach. The United Kingdom is taking a different route too, a route that has left some experts worried. The UK will allow mix and match vaccinations, allowing doctors to administer 2 different vaccines to a person. If there is a shortage of doses, this could be a gamble. Regulators in the United States have specifically asked doctors not to mix the shots, saying their safety hasn't been tested yet. With cases surging, the United Kingdom wants to administer as many shots as possible. An earlier guideline called on the health workers to give the first shot to as many people as possible, instead of focusing on completing the regime of 2 doses. So is the United Kingdom short of vaccines? Prime Minister Boris Johnson visited a London hospital on Monday and said the UK has enough shots to cover all citizens.
Well, that's completely untrue. We do have the capacity. The issue is to do with the supply of the vaccine, and there you've got it's not so much a manufacturing issue, though that is part of it. It's also that each batch needs to be properly approved and quality controlled.
Adding to their troubles are anti-vaxxers. Indonesia and the United Kingdom are 2 countries where vaccine confidence is a serious issue. Their leaders hope that with a quick rollout, they'll be able to fight the misinformation around vaccines and control the pandemic. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Well done. Thank you. Great. Fantastic. Good job.
Have you heard of the latest financial row the Vatican is caught in? It's worth $1.8 billion. $1.8 billion. This sum of money was allegedly transferred from the Vatican to Australia in the last 7 years. What for? Nobody knows. All we know is that Australian bishops did not receive the money that the Vatican apparently sent. They now want Pope Francis himself to explain the transfers. It's a rather complex story with many unknowns. Here it is.
7 years, $1.8 billion and 47,000 separate transfers. The transferor is allegedly the Vatican. And the transferee is allegedly the government of Australia. The Vatican says the money never left Rome. Australia says it never reached Canberra. The case is complex. The denial is strong. But the proof is overwhelming. The revelation has been made by Australia's own financial watchdog, Austrac. It says $1.8 billion were indeed sent from Rome to Canberra in the last 7 years. That's almost 2.3 billion Australian dollars. Out of this, $71.6 million were allegedly sent in 2014, $137.1 million in 2015, $295 million in 2016, $581 million in 2017, $422 million in 2018, $491.8 million in 2019, and $294.8 million in 2020. These transactions are undocumented. The reasons are unexplained. The identity of the recipients is yet to be disclosed. The bishops in Australia are baffled. They say they never received a single cent. Vatican officials are stunned too. They say the transactions look like science fiction. They claim the Vatican does not have that kind of money. According to their data, only $980,000 have been sent to Australia since 2014. Mostly for payment of salaries to bishops, expenses at the Vatican embassy, pensions and travel costs. $980,000. That is nowhere close to the figure released by Austrac. So what explains the $1.8 billion figure? Austrac promises to release the details in the next few days. But the bishops in Australia are getting restless. They're preparing to ask Pope Francis to explain the transfers. The controversy is set to explode. The Pope's image and reputation is at stake. We haven't heard the last of this story. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Before I explain the words you see behind me, I want you to take a look at a tweet by the US President. It's from the 4th of November, a day after Trump found out that he was on the path to lose the election. Let me quote, "We are up big, but they are trying to steal the election. We will never let them do it. Votes cannot be cast after the polls are closed." That's what Trump said. For the last 2 months, we've seen hundreds of such tweets about voter fraud from the US President. Tweets about how he secured a big, huge win, about how people voted illegally, how ballots disappeared, got stolen and were apparently harvested. For 2 long months, Donald Trump has been on a never-ending rant about how the election was rigged against him. Now his doomed efforts to overturn the defeat have taken a dramatic turn. In fact, calling it dramatic would be an understatement. It's a rather damaging turn for the president, one that could have legal consequences. President Donald Trump has himself been caught trying to rig the election. You heard that right. The president himself was trying to rig the election. He's been caught on tape asking a fellow Republican to find votes for him. Who is this fellow Republican? You may not have heard of him. His name is Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State from Georgia. On Saturday, Mr. Raffensperger received a call from the US president asking him to find 11,780 votes in the state of Georgia. Why this number? Because Trump lost Georgia by 11,700 99 votes. He wanted Raffensperger to find him one more vote, plus 11,799. Unaware that the phone call was being recorded, the audio clip has now been leaked. Here is the most telling excerpt from what the president said.
So, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state. The people of Georgia are angry. The people of the country are angry. And there's nothing wrong with saying that, that you've recalculated.
Well, Mr. President, the challenge that you have is the data you have is wrong.
Are we surprised? No. Has Donald Trump confessed? Definitely not. In fact, nothing has changed at all for the US president. Donald Trump says he was only trying to inquire about voter fraud, something that Brad Raffensperger had no clue about. Does Raffensperger agree? He does not. Look at this tweet now. The Secretary of State has said, and I quote, "Respectfully, President Trump, what you're saying is not true. The truth will come out." This is the man Trump called himself, calling out his lies. If you still need more proof, then let's make you listen to him.
Took the call and we had a conversation. He did most of the talking, we did most of the listening, but I did want to make my points that the data that he has is just plain wrong. I believe that because I had a conversation with the president, also he had a conversation with our chief investigator after we did the signature match audit of Cobb County last week. There may be a conflict of interest. I understand that the Fulton County District Attorney wants to look at it. Maybe that's the appropriate venue for it to go.
Now, here's the thing. What Donald Trump has done is an absolute violation of all federal and state statutes in the United States. A sitting president cannot just call up his party leaders and ask them to find some votes and get away with it. This is a severe criminal offense. It falls way beyond the reach of a potential pardon by Trump or his successor. There will be consequences. The upcoming Biden administration is unlikely to let go of it. Let me wrap the story with a statement by Kamala Harris.
And the President of the United States, the current President of the United States, called the Senate race in Georgia, this Senate race in Georgia, illegitimate. He called it illegal and invalid. Illegal and invalid, suggesting that the people of Georgia are trying to commit a crime. And then let's just fast forward to most recent history, which is yesterday. Have you all heard about that recorded conversation? Well, it was, yes, certainly the voice of desperation. Most certainly that. And it was a bald-faced, bold abuse of power by the President of the United States.
We started the year 2020 with devastating wildfires in Australia. It's 2021 now, and the wildfires are again in the news. Only this time, the blaze is closer home. Nagaland's pristine Zuko Valley is on fire, and its unique flora and fauna are at risk now. Here's a report.
This is the Zuko Valley, located nearly 30 kilometers from Nagaland's capital, Kohima. It is a popular trekking destination for tourists, but the picturesque valley is now on fire. The fire is said to have started on the afternoon of December 29th. Since then, gusty winds have fueled the raging inferno. Emergency forces have since jumped into action. Helicopters have been deployed, camps have been set up at Ground Zero, and over 200 firefighters are battling the blaze. Visuals from the valley showed an IAF helicopter refilling a Bambi bucket to help down the blaze. The Bambi bucket has an approximate capacity of 3,500 litres and is often used to drop waters on wildfires in forests. Despite the efforts, the fire continues to rage, now spreading to the neighbouring state of Manipur, destroying in its wake the valley's rich flora and fauna. This valley is ecologically sensitive. It is known for its biodiversity. In focus are the Zuko lily and the state bird of Nagaland. The Zuko lily is found only in the valley. The pristine valley is also home to the endangered blithe stragopan, the state bird that often falls prey to hunters. Now this inferno is further threatening its existence. While the cause of the fire remains unknown, many believe that humans could be responsible. This is not the first time the valley has dealt with something like this. In 2006, the Zuko Valley was affected by a similar blaze. This time, it could be worse. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
South Korea was one of the success stories of the Wuhan virus pandemic, but it's seen its phases of surges, including this one. People are eager to put the pandemic behind, but as long as masks are mandatory in the country, many people are also using this time to fix some perceived flaws. They're getting their noses fixed and lips filled. Cosmetic surgery is witnessing a surge in demand in South Korea. Here's why.
The world is eager to put the pandemic behind. As different countries begin their vaccination drives against COVID-19, people are looking forward to a world without masks and without social distancing. But in South Korea, people are using this time to their advantage. Before the pandemic is behind us and while people still have their masks on, many are rushing to clinics for last-minute cosmetic surgeries. Some are getting their noses fixed, while others are getting lip fillers. After all, with masks on, bruising and scars from surgery can be hidden, and healing becomes easier after surgery.
I thought it would be the best to get it done now before people start taking off their face masks when the vaccines become available next year. There will be bruises and swelling from the surgery, but since we'll all be wearing face masks, I think that should help.
Cosmetic surgery is now seeing huge demand in South Korea. Many feel it is their last chance to fix any so-called flaws before vaccines become widely available and masks are no longer mandatory. Cosmetic surgeries were already seeing an uptick since South Korea enforced a mask mandate and work-from-home policies. In fact, lockdowns have prompted great interest in one online cosmetic surgery platform.
Because people refrain from going outside, more people look for information through mobile application. We have 1.6 times more users than a year ago, totaling around 2.6 million users as of now.
South Korea was the world capital of plastic surgery even before the pandemic. According to an online cosmetic surgery platform, the industry is worth $10.03 billion in 2020. Strangely, surgeons say that many people have dipped into their emergency stimulus payments from the government to spruce up their faces. Many call it revenge spending, a way to express pent-up emotions triggered by the pandemic and subsequent lockdowns. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
With that, it's a wrap. We're leaving you as always with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching.